Chapter 24, Occlumency. Creature transpired has been lurking in the attic. Sirius said he had found him up there, covered in dust, no doubt looking for more relics of the Black family to hide in his cupboard. Though Sirius seemed satisfied with its story, it made Harry uneasy. Creature seemed to be in better mood on his reappearance. His bitter muttering had subsided somewhat, and he had submitted to orders more docilely than usual. Though once or twice, Harry caught the house elf staring avidly around at him, always looking quickly away when he saw that Harry had noticed. Harry did not mention his vague suspicion to Sirius, whose cheerfulness was evaporating fast now that Christmas was over. As the day of their departure back to Hogwarts drew nearer, he became more and more prone to what Mrs. Weasley called fits of sullens, in which he would become tactful and grumpy, often withdrawing to Buckbeak's room for hours at a time. His gloom seeped throughout the house, oozing under doorways like some noxious gas, so that all of them became infected with it. Harry didn't want to leave Sirius all alone again, with only Creature for company. In fact, for the first time in his life, he was not looking forward to returning to Hogwarts. Going back to school would mean placing himself once again under the tyranny of Dolores Umbridge, who had no doubt managed to force through another dozen degrees in their absence. Then there was no Quidditch to look forward to, now that he had been banned. There's even a likelihood that the burden of homework would increase as the exams drew nearer. Dumbledore remained as remote as ever. In fact, if it had not been for the DA, Harry thought he might have gone to Sirius and begged him to let him leave Hogwarts and remain in Grimmauld Place. Then on the very last day of the holiday, something happened that made Harry positively dread his return to school. "Harry, dear," said Mrs. Weasley, poking her head into his and Ron's bedroom, where the pair of them were playing wizard chess, watched by Hermione, Ginny, and Crookshanks. "Could you come down to the kitchen? Professor Snape would like a word with you." Harry did not immediately register what she had said. One of his castles was engaged in a violent tussle with a pawn of Ron's, and he was egging it on enthusiastically. Squash him, he's only a pawn, you idiot." "Sorry, Mrs. Weasley, what did you say?" "Professor Snape, dear, in the kitchen. He'd like a word." Harry's mouth fell open in horror. He looked around at Ron, Hermione, and Ginny, all of whom were gaping back at him. Crookshanks, whom Hermione had been restraining with difficulty for the past quarter of an hour, leapt gleefully upon the board and set the pieces running for cover, squealing at the top of their voices. "Snape," said Harry blankly. "Professor Snape, dear," said Mrs. Weasley reprovingly. "Now come on, quickly, he says he can't stay long." "What's he want with you?" asked Ron, looking unnerved as Mrs. Weasley withdrew from the room. "You haven't done anything, have you?" "No," said Harry indignantly, racking his brain to think what he could have done that would make Snape presume to Grimmauld Place. Had his last piece of homework perhaps earned a tea? He pushed open the kitchen door a minute or two later to find Sirius and Snape both seated at the long kitchen table, glaring in opposite directions. The silence between them was heavy with mutual dislike. A letter laid open on the table in front of Sirius. Said Harry to announce his presence. Snape looked around at him, his face framed between curtains of greasy black hair. "Sit down, Potter." "You know," said Sirius loudly, leaning back on his rear chair legs and speaking to the ceiling, "I think I'd prefer if you didn't give orders here, Snape. It's my house, you see." An ugly flush suffused Snape's pallid face. Harry sat down in a chair beside Sirius, facing Snape across the table. "I was supposed to see you alone, Potter," said Snape. the familiar sneer curling his mouth. But Black, I'm his godfather, said Sirius louder than ever. I am here on Dumbledore's orders, said Snape, whose voice, by contrast, was becoming more and more quietly whoppish. But by all means, stay, Black. I know you like to feel involved. What's that supposed to mean? Said Sirius, letting his chair fall back onto all four legs with a loud bang. Merely that I am sure you must feel, frustrated by the fact that you can't do nothing useful. Snape laid a delicate stress on the word. For the order. It was Sirius's turn to flush. Snape's lips curled in triumph as he turned to Harry. The headmaster has sent me to tell you, Potter, that it is his wish for you to study occlumency this term. Study what? Said Harry blankly. Snape's sneer became more pronounced. Occlumency, Potter, the magical defense of the mind against external penetration, an obscure branch of magic, but a highly useful one. Harry's heart began to pump very fast. Indeed, defense against external penetration, but he was not being possessed. They had all agreed on that. Why do I have to study occult thing? He blurted out. Because the headmaster thinks it's a good idea, said Snape smoothly. You receive private lessons once a week, but you will not tell anyone what you're doing. Least of all, Dolores Umbridge. You understand? Yes, said Harry. Who's going to be teaching me? Snape raised an eyebrow. I am, he said. Harry had a horrible sensation that his insides were melting. Extra lessons with Snape? What on earth had he done to deserve this? He looked quickly around at Sirius for support. Why can't Dumbledore teach? Harry asked Sirius aggressively. Why you? I suppose because of the headmaster's privilege to delegate less enjoyable tasks, said Snape silkily. I assure you, I did not beg for the job. He got to his feet. I will expect you at 6 o'clock on Monday evening, Potter. My office. If anyone asks, you are taking remedial potions. Nobody who has seen you in my class would deny you need them. He turned to leave, his black traveling cloak billowing behind him. Wait a minute, said Sirius, sitting up straighter in his chair. Snape turned to face him sneering. I'm in rather a hurry, Black. Unlike you, I do not have unlimited leisure time. I'll get to the point then, said Sirius, standing up. He was rather taller than Snape, who, Harry noticed, had balled his fist in the pocket of his cloak, over which Harry was sure was the handle of his wand. If I hear you're using these occlumency lessons to give Harry a hard time, you'll have me to answer to. How touching, Snape sneered. But surely you've noticed that Potter is very like his father. Yes, I have, said Sirius proudly. Well, then you know he's so arrogant and criticism simply bounces off him, Snape said sleekily. Sirius pushed his chair roughly away and strode around the table towards Snape, pulling out his wand as he went. Snape whipped out his own. They were glaring up at each other, Sirius looking livid, Snape calculating, his eyes darting from Sirius's wand tip to his face. Sirius, said Harry loudly, but Sirius appeared not to hear him. I've warned you, snivellishly, said Sirius, his face barely a foot from Snape's. I don't care if Dumbledore thinks you're reformed. I know better. Oh, but why don't you tell him so? Whispered Snape. Are you afraid he might not take the advice of a man who has been hiding inside his mother's house for 6 months very seriously? Tell me, how is Lucius Malfoy these days? I expect he's delighted his lapdog's working at Hogwarts, isn't he? Speaking of dogs, said Snape softly, did you know that Lucius Malfoy recognized you? Last time you risked a little John outside. Clever idea, Black, getting yourself seen on a safe station platform. Give you a cast iron excuse not to leave your hidey hole in the future. Bitten it. Sirius raised his wand. No! Harry yelled, vaulting over the table and trying to get in between them. Sirius, don't! Are you calling me a coward? Roared Sirius, trying to push Harry out of the way. But Harry would not budge. Why, yes, I am. Why, yes, I suppose I am, said Snape. Harry, get out of it, snarled Sirius, pushing him out of the way with his free hand. The kitchen door opened and the entire Weasley family plus Hermione come inside, all looking very happily, with Mr. Weasley walking proudly in their midst, dressed in a pair of striped pajamas covered by a mackintosh. Cured, he announced brightly to the kitchen at large. Completely cured. He and all the other Weasleys froze on the threshold, gazing at the scene in front of them, which was also suspended in mid-action, both Sirius and Snape looking towards the doors with their wands pointed in each other's face, with Harry immobile between them. A hand stretched out to each of them, trying to force them apart. Merlin's beard, said Mr. Weasley, the smile sliding off his face. What's going on here? Both Sirius and Snape lowered their wands. Harry looked from one to the other. Each wore an expression of uttermost contempt. Yet the unexpected entrance of so many witnesses seemed to have brought them to their senses. Snape pocketed his wand and flipped back across the kitchen, passing the Weasleys without a comment. At the door, he looked back. 6 o'clock, Monday evening, Potter. He was gone. Sirius glared after him, his wand at his side. But what's been going on? asked Mr. Weasley again. Nothing, Arthur, said Sirius, who was breathing heavily, so he had just run a long distance. Just a friendly little chat between his two old school friends. With what looked like an enormous effort, he smiled. So you're cured. That's great. That's great news. Really great. Yes, isn't it? Said Mrs. Weasley, leaning her husband forward into a chair. Healer Smedwick worked his magic in the end, found an antidote to whatever that snake got in its fangs, and Arthur learned his lesson about dabbling in Muggle medicine. Haven't you, dear? She added rather menacingly. Yes, Molly, dear, said Mr. Weasley meekly. The night's meal should have been a cheerful one, with Mr. Weasley back amongst them. Harry could tell Sirius was trying to make it so. Yet when his godfather was not forcing himself to laugh loudly at Fred and George's jokes, or offering everyone more food, his face fell back into a moody, brooding expression. Harry was separated from him by Mundungus and Mad-Eye, who had dropped in to offer Mr. Weasley their congratulations. He had wanted to talk to Sirius to tell him that he should not listen to a word Snape said, that Snape was goading him deliberately. And the rest of them didn't think that Sirius was a coward for doing so, as Dumbledore told him, and remaining in Grimmauld Place. But he had no opportunity to do so, and wondered occasionally, eyeing the ugly look on Sirius's face, whether he would have dared to, even if he had the chance. Instead, he told Ron and Hermione under his voice about having to take occlumency lessons with Snape. Dumbledore wants to stop you from having these dreams about Voldemort, said Hermione at once. Well, you won't be sorry not to have them anymore, will you? Extra lessons with Snape, said Ron, sounding aghast. I'd rather have the nightmares. They were to return to Hogwarts on the night bus the following day, escorted once again by Tonks and Lupin, both of whom were eating breakfast in the kitchen when Harry, Ron, and Hermione arrived. there next morning. The adults seemed to have been midway through a whispered conversation when the door all opened. All of them looked around hastily and fell silent. After a hurried breakfast, they pulled on jackets and scarves against the chilly gray January morning. Harry had an unpleasant, constricted feeling in his chest. He didn't want to say goodbye to Sirius. He had a bad feeling about this parting. He didn't know when they would next see each other and felt that it was incumbent upon him to say something serious to stop him doing anything stupid. Harry was worried that Snape's accusation of cowardice had stung Sirius so badly he might even now be planning some foolhardy trip beyond Grimmauld Place. Before he could think of what to say, however, Sirius had beckoned him to his side. "I want you to take this," he said quietly, thrusting a badly wrapped package, roughly the size of a paperback book, into Harry's hands. "What is it?" Harry asked. "A way of letting me know if Snape is giving you a hard time." "No, don't open it here," said Harry with a weary look at Sirius with a weary look at Mrs. Weasley, who was trying to persuade the twins to wear hand-knit mittens. "I thought Molly would approve, but I want you to use it if you need me, all right?" "Okay," said Harry, stowing the package away in the inside pocket of his jacket. But he knew he would never use it. Whatever it was, it would not be Harry, who lured Sirius from his place of safety, no matter how foully Snape treated him in their forthcoming occlumency classes. "Let's go then," said Sirius, clapping Harry on his shoulder and smiling grimly, and before Harry could say anything, they were heading upstairs, stopping before the heavily chained and bolted front door, surrounded by the Weasleys. "Goodbye, Harry. Take care." "See ya, Harry, and keep an eye out for snakes for me," said Mr. Weasley gently, shaking his hand. "Right, yeah," said Harry distractedly. It was his last chance to tell Sirius to be careful. He turned, looked into his godfather's face, and opened his mouth to speak, but before he could do so, Sirius was giving him a brief one-armed hug. He said gruffly, "Look after yourself, Harry." And the next moment, Harry found himself being shunted out into the icy winter air with Tonks, today heavily disguised as a tall, tweedy woman with iron gray hair, chivying him down the steps. The door of number 12 slammed shut behind them. They followed Lupin down the front steps. As he reached the pavement, Harry looked around. Number 12 was shrinking rapidly as those on either side of it stretched sideways, squeezing it out of sight. One blink later, it had gone. "Come on, the quicker we get on the bus, the better," said Tonks, and Harry thought there was a nervousness in the glance she threw around the square. Lupin flung out his right arm. Bang! A violently purple triple-decker bus had peered out of thin air in front of them, narrowly avoiding the nearest lamppost, which jumped backward out of its way. A thin, pimply, jug-eared youth in a purple uniform leaped down onto the platform and said, "Welcome to the—" Yes, we know, thank you," said Tonks swiftly. On, get on." As she shoved Harry forward toward the steps, past the conductor, who googled at Harry as he passed. It's Harry! If you shout his name, I will curse you into oblivion," muttered Tonks menacingly, now shunting Ginny and Hermione forward. "I've always wanted to go on this thing," said Ron happily, joining Harry on the board and looking around. It had been evening the last time Harry had traveled by night bus, and its 3 decks had been full of brass bedsteads. Now in the early morning, it was crammed with an assortment of mismatched chairs grouped haphazardly around windows. Some of them appeared to have fallen over when the bus stopped abruptly in Grimmauld Place. A few witches and wizards were still getting to their feet, grumbling, and someone's shopping bag had slid the length of the bus. An unpleasant mixture of Frog spawn, cockroaches, and custard creams were scattered all over the floor. "Looks like we'll have to split up," said Tonks briskly, looking around for empty chairs. "Fred, George, and Ginny, if you just take those seats at the back, Remus can stay with you." She, Harry, Ron, and Hermione proceeded up to the very top deck, where there were 2 chairs at the very front of the bus and 2 at the back. Sam Shumpike, the conductor, followed Harry and Ron eagerly to the back. Heads turned as Harry passed, and when he sat down, he saw all the faces flick back to the front again. As Harry and Ron each handed Stan 11 sickles each, the bus set off again, swaying ominously. It rumbled around Grimmauld Square, weaving it off the pavement, then with another tremendous bang, they were all flung backwards. Bang! They were all flung backwards. Ron's chair toppled right over and Pigwidgeon, who had been on his lap, busted out of his cage and flew twittering wildly up the front of the bus, where he fluttered down upon Hermione's shoulder instead. Harry, who had narrowly avoided falling by seizing a candle bracket, looked out the window. They were now speeding down what appeared to be a motorway. "Just outside Birmingham," said Stan, happily answering Harry's unasked question as Ron struggled up from the floor. "You keepin' well then, Harry? I see your name in the paper loads over the summer, but it weren't nothing very nice. I said to Art, I said, he didn't seem like another one we met him. Just goes to show you, doesn't it?" He handed over their tickets and continued to gaze enthralled at Harry, apparently. Stan didn't care how nice somebody was. If they were famous enough to be in a paper. The night bus swayed alarmingly, overtaking a lot of cars on the inside. The night bus swayed alarmingly, overtaking a line of cars on the inside. Looking toward the front of the bus, Harry saw Hermione cover her eyes with her hands, Pigwidgeon still swaying happily on her shoulder. Bang! Chairs slipped backwards again as the night bus jumped from Birmingham motorway to a quiet country lane full of hairpin bends. Hedgerows on either side of the road were leaping out of their way as they mounted the verges. From here they moved to a main street in the middle of a busy town, then a viaduct surrounded by top hills, then a wind-swept road between high-rise flats, each time with a loud bang. "I've changed my mind," muttered Ron, picking himself up from the floor for the 6th time. "I never want to ride on here again." "Listen, it's all going to stop after this," said Stan brightly, swaying toward him. "The bossy late woman up front who got on with Jim, she's given us a little tip to move you up in the queer. We're going to let Madame Marsh off first, though." There was more retching from downstairs, followed by a horrible splattering sound. "She's not feeling her best." A few minutes later, the night bus screeched to a halt outside a small pub, which squeezed itself out of the way to avoid a collision. They could hear Stan ushering the unfortunate Madame Marcia out of the bus and the relieved murmurings of her fellow passengers on the second deck. The bus moved on again, gathering speed until bang! They were rolling through a snowy Hogsmeade. Harry caught a glimpse of the Hogshead down its side street, the Severed Forest Head sign creaking in the wintry wind. Flecks of snow hit the large window at the front of the bus. At last they rolled to a halt outside the gates to Hogwarts. Lupin and Tonks helped them off the bus with their luggage and then got off to say goodbye. Harry glanced up at the 3 decks of the night bus, and it's all the passengers staring out at them, noses flat against the window. "You'll be safe once you're in the ground," said Tonks, casting a careful eye around the deserted road. "Have a good time, okay? Look after yourself," said Lupin, shaking hands all around and reaching Harry last. "And listen." He lowered his voice while the rest of them exchanged last-minute goodbyes with Tonks. "Harry, I know you don't like Snape, but he's a superb occlumens. And we all, Sirius included, want you to learn to protect yourself, so work hard, all right?" "Yeah, all right," said Harry, heavily looking up into Lupin's prematurely lined face. "See you then." 6 of them struggled up the slippery drive toward the castle, dragging their trunks. Hermione was already talking about knitting a few elf hats before bedtime. Harry glanced back when they reached the oak front door. The night bus had already gone, and he had half wished, given what was coming the following day, that he was still on board. Harry spent most of the next day dreading the evening. His morning potion lesson did nothing to dispel his trepidation, as Snape was unpleasant as ever, and Harry's mood was further lowered by the fact that the members of the DA were continually approaching him in the corridors between classes, asking hopefully whether there would be a meeting tonight. "I'll let you know when the next one is," Harry said over and over again. "But I can't do it tonight. I've got to go to, remedial potions." "You take remedial potions?" asked Zachariah Smith, surreptitiously, having cornered Harry in the entrance after lunch. "Good Lord, you must be terrible. Snape doesn't usually give extra lessons, does he?" As Smith strode away in an annoyingly buoyant fashion, Ron glared after him. "Shall I jinx him? I can still get him from here," he said, raising his wand and taking aim between Smith's shoulder blades. "Forget it," said Harry, dismissingly. "It's what everybody's going to think, isn't it? That I'm really stupid." "Hi, Harry," said a voice behind him. He turned around and found Cho standing there. "Oh," said Harry, as his stomach left uncomfortably. "Hi." "We'll be in the library, Harry," said Hermione firmly, as she seized Ron above the elbow and dragged him off toward the marble staircase. "Had a good Christmas?" asked Cho. "Yeah, not bad," said Harry. "Mine was pretty quiet," said Cho. For some reason, she was looking rather embarrassed. There's another Hogsmeade trip next month. Did you see the notice?" "What? Oh, no, I haven't checked the notice board since I got back." "Yes, it's on Valentine's Day." "Right," said Harry, wondering why she was telling him this. "Well, I suppose you want to—" "Only if you do," she said eagerly. Harry stared. He had about to say, "I suppose you want to know when the next DA meeting is," and her response did not seem to fit. "Oh, it's okay if you don't," she asked, looking mortified. "Don't worry, I'll see you around." She walked away. Harry stood staring after her, his brain working frantically. Then something clicked into place. "Cho? Hey, Cho!" He ran after her, catching her halfway up the marble staircase. Do you want to come into Hogsmeade with me on Valentine's Day?" "Oh, yes," she said, blushing crimson and beaming at him. "Right, well, that's settled then," said Harry, feeling that the day was not going to be a complete loss after all. He headed off to the library to pick up Ron and Hermione before their afternoon lessons, walking in a rather bouncy way himself. By 6 o'clock the evening, however, the glow of having unsuccessfully asked Cho Chang was insufficient to lighten the ominous feeling that intensified with every step Harry took towards Snape's office. He paused outside the door when he reached it, wishing he was almost anywhere else, and taking a deep breath, knocked and entered. It was a shadowy room, lined with shelves bearing hundreds of glass jars, in which flowed slimy bits of animals and plants, suspended in variously colored potions. In the corner stood a cupboard full of ingredients that Snape had once accused Harry, not without reason, of robbing. Harry's attention, however, was drawn toward the desk. Where a shallow stone basin engraved with runes and symbols laid in a pool of candlelight. Harry recognized it at once. Dumbledore's pensive. Wondering on what earth it was doing here, he jumped when Snape's cold voice came out of the dark corner. "Shut the door behind you, Potter." Harry did as he was told with a horrible feeling that he was imprisoning himself as he did so. When he turned back to face the room, Snape had moved into the light and was pointing silently at the chair opposite his desk. Harry sat down and so did Snape, his cold black eyes fixed unblinkingly upon Harry's, dislike etched in every line of his face. "Well, Potter, you know why you're here," he said. "The headmaster has asked me to teach you occlumency. I only hope you prove more adept at it than potions." "Right," said Harry tersely. "This may not be an ordinary class, Potter," said Snape, his eyes narrowing malevolently. "But I am still your teacher, and you will therefore call me Sir or Professor at all times." "Yes, sir," said Harry. "Now, occlumency, as I told you back in your dear godfather's kitchen, the branch of magic seals the mind against magical intrusion and influence." "And why does Professor Dumbledore think that I need it, sir?" said Harry, looking directly into Snape's dark, cold eyes and wondering whether he would answer. Snape looked back at him for a moment and then said contemptuously, "Surely even you could have worked that out by now, Potter. The Dark Lord is highly skilled at legomancy." "What's that, sir?" "It is the ability to extract feelings and memories from another person's mind." "He can remind?" said Harry quickly, his worst fear confirmed. "You have no subtlety, Potter," said Snape, his dark eyes glittering. "You do not understand fine distinction. It is one of the shortcomings that makes you such a lamentable potion maker." Snape paused for a moment, apparently to savor the pleasure of insulting Harry before continuing. "Only as muggles talk of mind reading. The book is not a book to be opened at all. It will examined at leisure. Thoughts are not etched on the inside of skulls to be perused by any invader. The mind is a complex and many-layered thing, Potter, or at least most minds are." He smirked. "It is true, however, those who have mastered legomancy are able under certain conditions to delve into the minds of their victims and to interpret their findings correctly. The Dark Lord, for instance, almost always knows when someone is lying to me. Only those skilled in occlumency are able to shut down those feelings and memories that contradict the lie and so utter falsehoods in his presence without detection." Whatever Snape had said, legitimately sounded like my reading to Harry, and he did not like the sound of it. "So he can know what we're thinking right now, sir? The Dark Lord is a considerable distance, and the walls and grounds of Hogwarts are guarded by by many ancient spells and charms to ensure the bodily and mental safety of those who dwell within them. Time and space matter in magic, Potter. Eye contact is often essential in legomancy." "Well then, why do I have to learn occlumency?" Snape eyed Harry, tracing his mouth with one long thin finger as he did so. The usual rules do not seem to apply to you, Potter. The curse that failed to kill you seems to have formed some connection between you and the Dark Lord. The evidence suggests that the times when your mind is most relaxed and vulnerable, when you are asleep, for instance, you are sharing the Dark Lord's thoughts and emotions. The headmaster thinks it's inadvisable for this to continue. He wishes me to teach you how to close your mind to the Dark Lord. Harry's heart was pumping fast again. None of this added up. But why does Professor Dumbledore want to stop it? He asked abruptly. I don't like it much, but it has been useful, hasn't it? I mean, I saw the snake attack Mr. Weasley, and if I hadn't, Professor Dumbledore wouldn't have been able to save him, would he, sir? Snape stared at Harry for a few minutes, still tracing his mouth with his finger. When he spoke again, it was slowly and deliberately, as though he weighed every word. It appears the Dark Lord has been unaware of the connection between you and him until very recently. Up until now, it seems that you've been experiencing his emotions, sharing his thoughts without his being any wiser. However, the vision you had shortly before Christmas, the one with the snake and Mr. Weasley, do not interrupt me, Potter, said Snape in a dangerous voice. As I was saying, the vision you had shortly before Christmas represented such a powerful incursion against the Dark Lord's thoughts I saw inside Snape, not his. I thought I told you not to interrupt me, Potter. But Harry did not care if Snape was angry. At least he seemed to be getting the bottom of this business. He had moved forward in his chair, so that without realizing he was perched on the very edge, tense as though poised for a fight. How come I saw through the snake's eyes? If it's Voldemort's thoughts I'm sharing. Do not say the Dark Lord's name, spat Snape. There was a nasty silence. They glared at each other across the Pensieve. Professor Dumbledore says his name, said Harry quietly. Dumbledore is an extremely powerful wizard, Snape muttered. While he may feel secure enough to use the name, the rest of us, he rubbed his left arm, apparently unconsciously on the spot where Harry knew the dark mark was burned into his skin. I just wanted to know, Harry began again, forcing his voice back into politeness. Why? You seem to have visited the snake's mind, because that's where the Dark Lord was at the particular moment. He was possessing the snake at times, and so you dreamed you were inside too. And he realized I was there? It seems so, said Snape coolly. How do you know? Said Harry urgently. Is this just the Professor Dumbledore guessing, or? I told you, said Snape, rigid in his chair. His eyes slit. To call me sir. Yes, sir, but how do you, said Harry impatiently, but how do you know? It is enough that we know, said Snape repressively. The most important point is that the Dark Lord is now aware that you are gaining access to his thoughts and feelings. He has also deduced the work is likely to work in reverse. That is to realize he might be able to access your thoughts and feelings in return. He might try and make me do things, asked Harry. Sir, he added hurriedly. He might, said Snape, sounding cold and unconcerned, which brings us back to occlumency. Snape put out his wand from the inside pocket of his robe, and Harry tensed in his chair. But Snape rarely raised the wand to his temple and placed its tip upon the gristly roots of his hair. When he withdrew, some slivery substance came away, started retching from the temple to wand, like a thick gossamer strand, which broke as he pulled the wand away from it, and fell gracefully into pensive, where it swiveled royally white. These are gas, not liquid. Twice more, Snape raised the wand to his temple and deposited the silvery stuff in the stone basin, and without offering any explanation of care of his behavior, he picked up the pensive carefully, removed it onto a shelf, out of the way, and returned to face Harry with his wand held at the ready. Stand up and take out your wand, Harry. You may use your wand to attempt to disarm me or defend yourself in any other way you can think of, said Snape. And what are you going to be doing? Harry said, sighing around Snape's wand apprehensively. I am